All right, we're back here again. Thanks again for joining us here. Another week, another amazing, amazing guest. You've already seen the title of today's episode. If you don't know today's guest, well, buckle up. You're going to know him, and you should know him. Help me welcome head coach of Morgan Park High School in the great city of Chicago, Illinois, Derrick Calhoun. Coach Calhoun, how are you, sir?
Doing pretty good today, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm here talking to you, so this is a great day. You've got a
Well,
better day because you've got a track meet later on today. So this is a really good day.
yeah, this is a good start to it.
I love it. I
Thanks
love,
for having me on.
oh man, it is my honor. As a guy who started his coaching career in the city of Chicago on the Catholic League side, you and Morgan Park, you were revered. I mean, I think that's the right word, revered. I was there in 95, 96, somewhere there, around that time.
Hmm.
And, you guys were just
Those were some good years in there, 95,
rocking and
96.
rolling. Yeah, absolutely. So I thought we would start today, Coach, with you've been at Morgan Park for around 30 years. I love that. That means consistency, longevity. Must mean you're doing something right because you're still there. That's a good thing. So I thought we would start by talking about these Morgan Park years, and then we'll take a hop step back and learn about track and field as it relates to how it became a part of your life. Were you an athlete, your other coaching stops, things like that. So I thought we would start with Morgan Park, Derrick Calhoun history. So maybe start us with kind of what year did you start at Morgan Park, and maybe how did you get to Morgan Park?
Actually started there the fall of 89. So it's interesting how I did get there because I was at Providence Catholic in New Lenox prior to there. I was there for, I think, 2 seasons. And then before that, I was at Corliss High School in Chicago for a season. But back then, and you might remember, they used to have the Prairie State Games.
Yeah.
And Ed Adams, you know Coach Adams.
Love Coach Adams. Yes.
Well, we went to high school together in elementary school. We were on the same track team.
Oh, wow. I think that's
So-
birds of a feather right there. I
yes.
think so. Ed Adams was such a huge blessing to me when I became a coach. He was I'm sure he doesn't know, but what a accidental mentor to me he was. I mean, what an amazing guy. I love him.
So he was in charge of, I think it was called the Windy City region for Chicago for the Prairie State Games. And he asked me to come and coach the girls track portion of that. And there were 2 girls on the team, Kathy Williams and Nicole Randall from Morgan Park. And when the Prairie State Games were over, they were, telling me how the coach that they had, teacher there in the building, was transferred to another school and they needed a coach. And what I think about coming and coaching them. So I gave that some thought, being, born and raised in Chicago. I thought that was a great opportunity to come back to the city and to see what I could do there. So that's how I got to Morgan Park. They went before the LSC, local school council, and recommended that I come on.
These were athletes that did this?
These were athletes.
Wow. Hello, leadership. To step up and
Exactly.
say, hey, we think we found our guy, and then to carry on and go to a council, that's a big step right there.
Exactly.
What was the status of Morgan Park track and field at that point? Were they perennial champions when you took over? Was there 5 girls on the team? What were we looking at?
There were a good number of girls on the team. There were probably at least 35.
Okay.
And I know that the year previous they had won the city championship, but here's an interesting twist, and I think this is where the whole story changes. I came in the fall of 89, so 90 is the first track season. Mm-hmm. We'd won the city championship, so it's the week of state sectionals. So we're having a team meeting, and I've got outlined on the board all the events I think that we can score in, and one of the seniors raised their hand and said, "Coach, you want us to score points?" And so I looked at them, and they're looking at me like, who is this guy? He wants us to score points at the state meet.
Right.
And they had just won the city championship. So I said, well, when you go downstate, because they had qualified before, what do you do?
Right.
They said, well, we run on Friday and then Saturday we watch the meet. I said, well, if we go, we're not going to watch the meet and we're not going to sit in the stands. So right there, that told me what the mindset was.
Yeah.
We're good athletes, but we're only good for the city. And that's as far as we can go.
So you saw an immediate need, not necessarily physically, but that mentally, that expectation level of the athletes.
Yes, yes. And here's another interesting part. They did well. We had a young Kathy Williams who helped bring me on. She scored in the 400, the 200. And the young lady that asked the question, Carol, you want us to score points? She ran third leg on the 4x1. They got fourth.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Did you see that same mentality from them at that point academically as well, or were they pretty on point in the classroom?
They were pretty on point academically, but I think that with the athletics, it combined with, if I can take my athletics this far, I can take my life this far.
Hmm. So what did you bring differently? Obviously, there's an expectation level of like, hey, we're not going downstate to participate, just to participate, to be only on a Friday. We're a Friday Saturday team.
Friday,
uh,
Saturday.
what did you do? What were some of the, I call it tactics, I guess, to help change that mindset in those first few years?
I think one of the main things is when they went down there that year, they scored some points, they got some medals. I forgot what place we came in, but that sort of set the stage. And then I introduced that they participate in summer track because I had started a summer or youth summer track club back in 1987 or 88. And so they did that as well. So that kind of opened up their eyes to what's out there and the level of competition. And we get to travel a little bit. So I think that was part of it.
So you helped. What I'm hearing is you helped them go kind of from a city focus, like in which it's the city of Chicago, so it's not a bad city to focus on as far as that championships. But instead of that being the holy grail, the top, expanded their world of track and field of competing at state and scoring points, and then hey, there's this whole other world of summer track, which kind of opens you up nationally at that point.
Yes. And going to those meets where, there are 5,000, 7,000 athletes from 8 to 18, that gives you a totally different view of, like you said, track and field and the world.
Yeah, that changes it a little bit. What did when you were starting out and you're starting to change this mindset, did you see a path for Morgan Park to become a dominant force in Illinois? Or did you, at that point, was it still like, hey, we'll be better and we'll score some medals and maybe we can get on the podium as a team? Or was it kind of an immediate like, hey, the talent pool is here. I just have to help guide the coaching and the attitude.
Had to do that, uh, goal setting that they could, go beyond what they were used to. But there were a lot of smaller obstacles, that we had to overcome along the way. And along the way with this portion, I'll kind of bring in Coach Monica Dawson because she's the other instrumental piece.
Okay.
Because when I got there, they didn't even have uniforms or enough uniforms. So we went into an old storage room and found some volleyball shorts and, the kind with the elastic around and we found some singlets, but there were not enough singlets to go around. So, as a coach, you've got to improvise and create, situations. So, well, we don't have enough singlets to go around. So I tell you what we do. Can everybody get a white t-shirt and wear that? And then you can put your singlet on over the white t-shirt. Then when you're done with your race, you don't have to go to the locker room or anything like that. You can just take it off and give it to the next girl.
That is ingenuity at its best. I love that. It's like we don't have enough, but we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it stretch. We're gonna make it work.
We're going to make it work. Didn't have warm-ups. So if you've got sweats at home, yeah, bring those. Some were warming up in the jacket that they wore to school. So we really started at bare bones, and we were at a meet in Oak Forest, and this is where I met Coach Dawson. And she would later go on to say that she saw this team coming in and they didn't have on any uniforms. She didn't know who they were, and their uniforms were all dingy, but they were beating all my girls.
There's that saying, look good, feel good. Well, sometimes it don't matter what you look, as long as you're fast and you can beat people.
Right.
So how did you turn it around? What was this, you've been here 30 years now, and, spoiler alert, you've got uniforms and such. Was it a quick turnaround, or was it a slow boil? And was there ever a catalyst that helped kind of boost it to be supported? I mean, what you're talking about is not underperforming, but under capitalized. The team was not given the budget to get uniforms and such like that. How did that change for you?
I think once we start having some success outside of just city, so that was 90, and then Coach Dawson came in 91. And we had seen each other a couple times during meets, and it was just myself at that time, and we had a teacher that was a sponsor, but she wasn't a coach. So I'd seen her at track meets, and she was doing well with her group. I think she had back then a 4x8. She was at Thornwood High School. She had a 4x8 that made it the top times. And she had one of those voices that could reach to the other side of the track. I said, I think I can use that. So she had the enthusiasm, and it looked like she was committed to her team. So we talked, and she decided to, come on over. And then, she got a surprise. She was in the building, and we're on the second floor, and I was going to show her where our classroom was, because after school is out, we have study hall. So she says, well, where's your indoor track? I said, well, you're walking on it. It was the second floor of the building there. And because a lot of people don't know, that are not in the city, that city schools don't have indoor tracks. So later on, she would, as she would tell the story at her own Hall of Fame induction in 2016, it was like, OMG, what did I get myself into?
We had Craig Collins on the show a couple of weeks ago, and
Yeah.
we talked about that very thing. At De La Salle, where I was at, no track. I mean, they now have a track. They didn't have a track when I was there, but it was, maybe I had 30 yards before I had to do an immediate 90-degree left turn for another maybe 30 yards, and that was it until the weather got somewhat decent so we could go outside. It's tough. Chicago track kids are tough. Let me tell you what, not only because of the weather, but just because of how and where they have to train, not get to train, have to train.
Have to train, exactly.
Yeah. So you talked about Coach Monica. How did it go? What was kind of the first success you guys had there as you moved from a city championship focused team to more state, and even, in the summer, nationally kind of purview?
Well, she came in 91, so the first track season. Then 92, we got second at the state meet.
Yeah, okay.
With 6 girls doing the scoring.
Now, was that a surprise or a under surprise? Meaning, did you think you could win it, or was it, you're like, we can maybe get 4th or 5th, and you overachieved and got second?
Well, we kind of mapped things out, and actually on the way back from the city championship, which they won again that year, I was talking with the team captain. What do you think the best way to go? Do we concentrate on just our relays, more individuals? What are we up against? And for that, we decided to be more relay heavy. We had some individuals, and they came away second and in 92, and that kind of started the journey. And I think the number is, for the next 12 years, we were either first or second 11 times out of 12 years.
Wait, hold on. We must have had an audio blip there, because it sounded like you said for roughly the next 10 plus years, 11, 12 years, you were either first or second at the state meet.
Yes.
Wow. So before we get into that, that's an amazing stat right there. Go back to that second place team, that first one. How special was that when you come back to the school and now the kids are back with their peers and you're amongst your peers, your administration and other teachers and coaches, and you do what maybe wasn't expected of you? You get a trophy,
Right.
you bring a trophy back home. What did that feel like?
Oh, that was absolutely great. That was fantastic. That opened your eyes to future possibilities. And I think that's what happened with the team, that they realized, okay, we can compete outside of the city limits and we can do it on a large scale. And that felt good. I'd like to do that again. And then you have the older ones that are on the team, and when the new ones come on, they can kind of be models as to here's what's expected. Here's what we do. Uh, we go to study hall every day. You're expected to be there. Attendance is taken. And this is how we conduct ourselves. So when you have team buy-in, it makes it a lot easier when the new members come on board, because the new ones come on and then they say, well, this is expected. What do I have to do to make this happen? Well, here's what you have to do.
Yeah, it's that setting of the bar. And I try not to talk about setting the bar originally. It's resetting the bar, because no matter where you are in your program, the bar is set somewhere. It could be
Yes.
extremely low.
It
So
could be.
you gotta reset it, but there is a bar set for your program. So how do you reset it higher and higher? Now, they've done studies, Coach, at the Olympics, and they look at, I'm not sure exactly how they quantify it, but the happiness factor of the medalist, the gold, the silver, and the bronze. And as expected, when they look at the facial features of the gold medalist, they have the highest kind of happiness quotient, right? They won the gold medal. So there's a lot of smiling, laughing, tears, those kind of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you would think, well, out of those three, the second place, silver, would probably have the second highest happiness quotient, and then the bronze the third, right? But it actually turns out, so the gold medalists have the best. They won the golds. They're the most happiest, most satisfied on the award stand. The bronze winner had the second most, and then the silver was third. They were actually the most disappointed of the three, and so they started digging into it, and what they found out was the gold medalist, again, that's kind of, we all understand you won. So what else is there?
Right.
That's the best. So we can put them to the side. The bronze medalists were so excited that they got a medal, because, one slip up and they would have been fourth, right?
Right.
So they're extremely happy. Like, oh my goodness, thank goodness I made it. Like, I didn't lose. I didn't get the fourth. I got a medal. And the reason the silver medalists were the lowest of those three is because it's kind of a loss aversion kind of theory. They felt more like they lost the gold than they did win the
Okay.
silver. So I say all that to ask, did getting second place as a team, was there a hunger left? Was there like, hey, that's great. We're super excited. We never in our wildest dreams would have thought we'd have gotten second. But if we would have just done this, this, and this, we could have gotten first. And so did that occur? And did they come back and maybe double down on that culture that you're building?
I think that would be pretty accurate. Once you see that, oh, if I can do this, what else can I do?
Mhm.
If I change this, if I show up every day, those little things. And we need people in these events. Maybe I can encourage someone to, try that event. I mean, during those years and during that span of time where we're really doing well on a consistent basis, we had young ladies that ran all the relays. And that's a tall task, because you're talking about running 3 or 4 relays on Friday to qualify, then coming back in less than 24 hours and doing it all over again.
That's a good point. So you and I know this, but we have listeners who are outside of Illinois. So in the state of Illinois, we've got the traditional 4x1s and 4x4s and 4x8, of course, just like I think every state has those four. But we
Yes.
actually add the 4x2 here in Illinois. So when you're talking about a tall task, that's four events. If they're doing all the relays, of course, that's a tall task. Even if you're just doing the sprint relays, the 4x1, 2, and 4. That's a lot of rounds, a lot of pressure, and a lot of performance.
That's a lot. And for the longest time, they had the sprint medley relay, 1-1-2-4. That started off the girls' state meet.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yes.
That's right. So they did 1-1-2-4, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that is a lot. You just do relays. That's a day and a half right there of work.
So they were, it's the buy-in.
Mhm.
I'm bought in. I may not be in this individual event, but I've got a responsibility. I'm on a relay team, or I'm part of the relay team, or the leader, and I've got to make sure that they're ready and that we report on time. We've got our numbers on. So there's a lot of responsibility that goes with just being on a relay. It's not just being on a relay, it's points.
So as you were building a very relay intensive program, that makes me feel like you had to have your numbers of the team had to increase because again, the more fresh the athlete, the better likely the performance. What were you doing and Coach Monica doing recruiting wise inside the school to get more athletes, or did you kind of stay around that 30 to 35 roster?
The numbers actually ballooned and went up because then they were televising the state meet on one of the public access channels.
That's right. Yeah.
And the newspapers, people still read newspapers, so we were we were
newspaper. What is that? I don't know
what
what that
a newspaper. What's this guy talking about? So they were reading about us, and actually more girls came out.
Yeah.
There was a point in time where we actually had 50.
Wow.
And that was too many because we didn't have room in the hallways.
That's right.
To even warm up. Some would warm up in this hallway and some had to go to the other hallway. And it was like, oh.
So that's what a problem to have. And
right.
And unless you train in the hallways, you have no idea.
No idea.
What the problem really is. Yeah. We've yet to mention, the hallway training and when a teacher or a kid was in a classroom still and they would open the door right as your kid is going.
Oh.
many of jump steps to get out of the way.
Yes.
So you mentioned the roster balloons, and that makes a lot of sense, right? Success,
Yes.
People want to be around success. So the program's getting better. So it's like, hey, I can join that track team. They're doing pretty good. Maybe I can get a ring from state or score some points.
Right.
Did it all come naturally from the program rising, or was there any active recruiting? Like you go to the volleyball team and you're like, hey, you might be a good high jumper or anything like that?
We did do that type of recruiting. We did posters throughout the school and flyers, tryouts. I would go to the freshman gym classes, talk to those PE instructors, and maybe leave some flyers, or who do you have? Can I come watch one of if they were in a track session in their gym class, go watch that.
And what are you teaching as well at Morgan Park?
No, my full-time profession and what I retired from was the Will County Sheriff's Police.
I thought so. Okay, I thought I remembered that. So that's a whole nother angle. Hold on, you're a BA cop with this, or you? If I were to ask one of your athletes back from the late '90s, early '90s here, if I asked them, I was like, hey, so was Coach Calhoun kind of a disciplinarian, on top of it all? What would they say?
They would say yes, and you could probably ask Coach Dawson, because she tells the story that when she got there, the girls came up to her and said, "We're glad you're here," because with him, you could hear a pin drop in the hallway.
Hey, that's a good I don't know, lesson is the right word, but as far as having representation of all, black,
Yes.
white, male, female, yeah, that's a good. You probably maybe I'll ask it. Did you see the team get better with that as you have now a female on staff as well to helping coach?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And it's having the right one. And as I've often said, in the beginning, it was just me really coaching. And then when Coach Dawson came on, the yin had its yang, and the circle was now complete, and we went forward.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As soon as I connected the dots, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. And what were you guys doing? You got a full-time job in the police force, which in any city, that's a big deal. In the city of Chicago, huge deal. What, if anything, were you guys doing coaching education wise? We didn't have as many options as we do today, but there
No.
were some options. What was available to you that you guys were taking advantage of?
Well, I had gone to just about any track and field clinic that was put on. The Illinois Association, ITCA, has the annual. So I would go there along, and during that same time, there was a big track and field clinic down at Indiana, put on by Sam Bell. Remember Sam Bell out of Indiana, and would go to those. And USA Track and Field had their coaching education program, still does,
Mhm.
with their level 1, 2, and 3. So I've gone through those along the way. And then USTF CCCA came along, and they established their academy with all their courses in that. And Mike Korn over there,
Oh yeah,
he
great
he
guy.
had he heads that up. So I've taken a lot of their courses. And actually, at their last convention, I think it was in 18, and I was coming in to sign in for the class, and Mike Korn says, "Coach, I don't think there's many more classes left for you to take."
Now, not to jump ahead, but something you said there kind of struck me. You've been doing this for 30 plus years, and you mentioned, the IDCA clinic. I'm so happy that you mentioned the Indiana clinic, because when I was at De La Salle, I went down to
Okay.
Bloomington for that clinic, and it changed. It was one of the two coaching education catalyst for my coaching career. I sat in with Marshall Goss teaching hurdles,
Mm,
and it was like,
yes.
oh wait, there's like actually a real way to coach hurdle, like a logical way. That changed how I pivoted and started coaching hurdlers, and they got a lot better. The second being, I went to USFCA, no, I'm sorry, USATF level 2 jumps, and Boo Schexnader was the coach, and
Yes.
I could get in a line of 1,000 people that would say that class changed their coaching career, because Boo Schexnader is amazing. But something you said there that was that struck me is you mentioned the USTFCCCA Academy, which is relatively new, right? It's the
Yes.
one of the newer ones. That means you have continued to study your craft. You're not just sitting on your laurels. And anybody, it'd be hard for anybody to disagree. Like, hey, why does this guy need to take classes? Look what he's done, continues to do. Why has he got to be in classes? But yet you continue to seek out opportunities to expand your knowledge as a track coach.
Exactly. I think that you can never be set on the knowledge. There's always something out there. Whether certain things don't change, the laws of physics don't change, but certain things are discovered. Whether there's physiology, or we used to think this worked, but now that it doesn't work, and here's why. And listen to a lot of the biomechanics, Ralph Mann. So I always think there's something else that you can learn, or something that someone is presenting that kind of confirms what you're already doing, that maybe you're on the right track.
Kudos to you, coach. I mean, there's plenty of guys and gals that at this age and stage of their career close that part of the book and say, hey, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. The whole, old dog, new tricks type of thing.
Yeah,
I'm just going to do my old dog thing. It's all good. It's work. So it's hard to argue against it, but you continue to seek out. And I love that. And another thing, when you talk about, confirming the things that you do, like, oh, okay, that feels good. I've been doing that. And this coach
right.
is also in that. It's also kind of where you are in the moment. So maybe some of these teachers that you've had, these different coaches and clinics, some of them are probably, saying a lot of the same things, but they're saying it in a different way. And so
Yes,
maybe that catches you differently, and also where you are in that day, whether it's an early morning class, an at night class, a summer class versus in the track season class. It may just be the right time for you to hear that message and it finally
right.
clicks. Yeah, that's awesome. So having that opportunity to always be learning, it's more beneficial, I think, in that respect.
Yes, and it gives you a lot to pull from depending upon what situation you might be in at practice or coaching. You can, well, maybe, because I always tell coaches when they're talking to me, what do I do here? What do I do there? What do they need?
Mm,
What does the athlete need? What does the team need? And you may be able to draw on some of your knowledge and, well, maybe I can try this because this is what they may need.
right, that's all. Yeah, very athlete dependent.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's go back. I think we're around 95. You got second place, is right around that time.
Well, let's see. 92 was second.
Okay, 92.
We got fourth in 93. And I think that kind of fueled the fire.
Yeah, I was going to say, wait a
Uh,
minute, you went back. Now you went backwards to fourth, still a great podium finish.
Exactly.
And now here's what's interesting. You're at a place in your program where you get fourth and it is a bit disappointing. You're like, wait a minute, we just got second. We're supposed to move back up.
Well, we had, a relay that was disqualified that, we lost some points there. So 94, 95, 96, they got first.
So what was that first state championship like?
Oh, that was unbelievable. It was like we got second at 92, we had some disqualifications in 93, and we still had some of those girls on the team
Mm,
at 94. So they had lived it.
right.
We still had Nicole Keys on the team. She was a senior and she won the long jump. She won the hurdles, the 100 hurdles. She ran on a relay. She ran on the 200. We had Elisa Gillian who won the 400 and anchored the medley, ran the open 4, ran on the 4x4. She did that on Friday and did it on Saturday. So we just had a lot of contributions in various areas, our relays. Very interesting about that 94 team that won that first one, just how we look at doing our analysis. And Coach Dawson does a lot of that type of work. Who's coming back?
Oh yeah.
What events are still strong? What events there's a possibility in? Well, in 94, we had 4 new girls, 3 were freshmen, 1 was a sophomore. And we do some testing in the beginning. And we said, with these 4, if they can run 49.5 for the 4x1 relay, they can get 4th or 5th. And we don't have to use our varsity members. They can be in individual events.
Mm,
So when I say they ran together all season, they ran all kind of relays all season long. We get to the state meet, they're all in the same room. And the last handoff was a little shaky, but they got 5th. And we had looked at, okay, they could get 4th or 5th.
Coach Dawson's like Moneyball with track and field. Wow, that's an analyst right there, man. Holy cow.
Yeah, she looks at the events and I might say, well, what about the 4x2? No, leave that alone. That's still hot.
Still
Okay.
hot. Now, we don't talk about X's and O's on this podcast. There's a lot of great coaching education, like we talked about, and some awesome coaching education podcast out there. But I was wondering, you mentioned some tests that you do. Our goal is to bring as much value to listeners as possible. Would you mind sharing what kind of tests you guys have done throughout the years to help kind of identify who maybe is a short sprinter versus a hurdler versus a long jumper? Unless that's Morgan Park trade secrets, of course.
Oh, no, these are just things I've picked up from uh, those that I call mentors and those that I've called people that have been influential in my thinking. But we came up with, it's just a battery of four tests: two are jump tests, reach jump test, and a standing long jump, and 55 dash. So we have to do these in the fall,
Mm.
and a 300 for stamina. And that kind of gives us a pretty good indication right there. And then once later on, we were able to get some uh, timing equipment, the speed traps.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started in January, we'll do a standing 30 and a fly 30 on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so that gives us a pretty good indication. And over the years, we've collected the data, and I went and categorized it. Well, if she ran this in a standing and a fly 30, most of the girls who ran these times end up being in this event. Most of the girls who ran these times end up being 400, 800.
Yeah.
So it helps us to categorize, but it also, a couple of the tests we repeat on a yearly basis: the short sprint for time, their improvement. And then what do we need to do to help them improve? And we do this for the whole team, even if they're a miler, because I think this is a point that's overlooked in middle distance. You have to have foot speed to be a good miler. You can't be, well, they're not fast and they don't have this, so we'll make them a distance runner. You have to be fast.
Do you have that data all the way through today?
I have the data. I don't have it in, I've got tryout data from the early 90s, and the speed trap, I think I had that going back to maybe early 2000s.
Wow, that's huge though. I mean, that helps you kind of the guessing game, if you will, of who should
Yes,
where, at least makes you help make more educated guesses, if you will.
right.
Yeah. Wow. So 1994, you win your first state championship. Again, the emotional, the elation. Um, I can't even fathom, what that was like for the program and for the kids. And then you go on this streak. So what happened? I mean, there's no more fourth places here for a while. Well, did it just become such a magnet of like, oh, the Morgan Park girls won state, so I'm going to join that team? I assume you didn't get any kind of greater as a coach. I mean, you're continually getting better, but it's not like you flipped a switch and now you're a track coach. Like, how'd this happen? I mean, this is an unbelievable streak.
I think it's a combination of, everybody wants to be a part of something successful.
Mm.
So we had the numbers coming out. We had some good potential athletes, coming out. We had some that, I want to go to that school because I saw them run on the state meet on TV. And interesting enough, one of those athletes was Alexandria Anderson.
Yeah, we were definitely going to talk about her.
So we can get back to that, but she saw us run on TV at the state meet, and I want to go there.
Oh, wow.
So she came there for the 7th and 8th grade program that Morgan Park has. But I think it was a combination of the getting the athletes in. Of course, they have to be trained, continuing your coaching education, backing from the administration,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that we had just the basic things that we need, good uniforms, transportation, it's along the way we got to know some physicians who would later become like our team doctors, like a podiatrist or orthopedic that we could send the girls to if they really needed it. So all that becomes part of a championship support system.
Yeah, you made a great point there about the administration. No one does any of this on their own.
No,
The greatest coach in the world doesn't do it without athletes and doesn't do it without an administration that supports them. If you're a coach right now and you've got a budget and uniforms and transportation and meet schedule, maybe take a second to just go thank your athletic director or your facility director.
right.
Just like coaches, you don't hear thank you enough. I'm with you 100%. Those administrators, they don't hear thank you enough either. So make sure kind of reach out and just say thanks. Appreciate what you do
Yes,
for our program. And if you don't have those things, ask the administrator, figure out who they are, and make a relationship with that administrator. I think administrators on the whole are good people. And I know
yes.
there's administrators that don't support our sport the way we want it to be supported, and we're
Right.
very biased, of course. But that doesn't change if you don't make relationship and show the importance of your team and that success that you have, which may not be athletically to begin with, depending on where your facility is or where your program is. It may be academically, it may be community wise. Show success. To coach your point there, success begets success. It grows exponentially there. So
Yes.
great point about it, administration. So you mentioned Alexandria. What years was she there for varsity?
She was, let's see, 5, 4, 3, 2. I think she came in 01.
Okay, oh one.
She graduated in 05. So
So with the caveat that I know we're going to miss some people, talk to us about some of every athlete you've had that's not just been on the team has been special because they help support and build the program to what it
right.
is. But when we talk about the quote unquote fast times and far jumps and things like that, who are some of the athletes that, and I know there are a ton. So you have
Mm.
all permission that you're going to forget some people. So let him off the hook here. But who are some of the special people? And let's start with Alexandria Anderson, because that's always the one I remember right off the top of my head. Wow, she was fast.
Yes. Now she came in, we actually coached her for 6 years because she was in the school as part of 7th and 8th grade program. So we saw the potential there. And, when you get in someone of that caliber, this is where you can draw on all of the, coaching knowledge and coaching education that you've gone through, and you get someone that you can take to the next level. Okay, what are the things that I have to do to get them there? So you have that information, and you also have mentors that you can call on, and maybe we can get back to some of who they are.
Yes.
But that was a strategic plan. We saw her range, 100, 200, 400, long jump.
That's right.
So, that took some special planning because, every meet you go to, you're not going to do all 4 of those.
Right.
And so kind of plan out her career that way, plan out her summer, junior national teams, junior Olympic teams, what meets she's going to attend, what events she's going to participate in. So that was a little different kind of planning, especially post-season.
Now, for those of us who don't know Miss Anderson, give us an idea of what her high school PRs were. And then I want to know, so you had her from 7th grade, was she fast right from the get-go, or did you saw the promise and had to build it?
She had the potential from the very beginning. I think as a freshman, she came in, she was already running low 12s in the 100. End up running 11:41 her junior year, which is the state record. Her senior year at junior meet, she'd run 11:38. Ran 52.6 for the 400 meters, 23 in the 200. And all those are still state records
Oh, is that right? Wow.
since 2005, since she graduated. Also, the year she graduated at the junior meet in Long Beach, California for the 200, she ran 22.96.
Hmm.
Uh, Jumped 20 feet 9 in the long jump, breaking the record of Jackie Joyner Kersey.
Well, that's a record.
That's
Anytime
that's
you break a record with her name on it, oh, hello.
but she's got one rare exception. We've had a 20-foot jumper already prior to Alexandria. Crystal Riley had jumped 20 feet 2
Oh, wow. I didn't
at
know
the
that. Holy
at the
cow.
Junior Olympics, and well, she's Crystal Lindsay now, and she's teaching and coaching over at Kenwood High School.
Yeah, now I was definitely going to get into your coaching tree. You'd have to have a lot of former athletes that are coaches, I would imagine, or at least teachers, which is still as special.
Well, we've actually found out there in all walks of life, which is the good thing. We've got actually we got two over at Kenwood coaching. Sienna Tab, she's class of 2010.
Wow,
That was a great class. She ended up going to Purdue and being an All-American in the 100 hurdles.
awesome.
Um, so we've got one now who wants to be a coach who came back. So she's kind of being mentored, but they are branched out in so many professions in life.
Mhm.
And, that's what you want. They're working in corporate areas. Uh, Actually, we had one of our former athletes stop by practice this past Monday. Her name is Sarah. Her and her dad would happen to be driving by and stop by to talk to us. She was part of those teams, '04, '05, and she's an elementary school teacher in Seattle.
Oh,
So
wow.
they are branched out. We've got some down in Houston that were part of those teams, and their children are running track. We've
Awesome.
got a number of PhDs. We've got nurses. We've got a number that work in the Chicago public school system. We got principals. We've got quite a few that uh, they're buying their own homes.
Nice.
They're raising a family.
Nice.
They may have come from a single parent home and now they're raising their kids in a two-parent home.
Yeah.
You know, to me, that all goes back to the young lady that asked us, Coach, you want us to score points? Well, they found out they can score points in life.
Yeah, that's right.
I think it started there, and I'm sure I'm leaving out quite a few, but there's so many. I'd have to open up our all-time record books and performances.
Yeah.
We've got, and I'll mention her name because Lakeisha Levy, I think she still has, yes, she does. She still has our freshman sophomore record in the long jump. It's like 19.8.
That's the Frosh off record.
Record.
Oh, wow.
And just to show you what exposure will do, we went to the National Scholastic Meet. It was in North Carolina, and she was on the team, and she kept saying, "Oh, I love North Carolina. I love North Carolina. I want to live here." So she went to U of I. Fast forward, she eventually got her PhD in physical therapy. And 2 years ago, guess where she moved with her husband? North Carolina.
North Carolina. All because she went there for a meet
Yes,
high school student. It was like, this is a nice area. Hey, that is a not often talked about aspect of specifically summer track club, because it's when you're in your high school team, you're kind of in your region for the majority
right.
of time. And a lot of time, the first time going down to Charleston is the first outside of Chicagoland
Yes,
trip
yes, it
some kids
is.
take. But that ability in summer track and in college where you're going to different states you've never gone to, maybe completely different regions. You mentioned the Long Beach meet, going all the way to the West Coast. The opening up and broadening young people's experiences is only beneficial. I mean, it's only greatness for their future lives and families.
Oh, it's that's part of the educational process.
Yeah.
They all the things that you name, staying overnight at a hotel, going to a meet, broadens your horizon. So when it's time for you to have an opportunity to take a job in a different part of the country, you have no problem going.
Right.
That's I've done that before. I know what this is about.
Right. Yeah, it's not scary. I mean, I saw a stat the other day. I'm sure I'm going to get the percentage wrong, but it was a huge percentage. I think like 70, maybe even 80%. And for someone who is the exact opposite of this, it's hard to believe this, but something like 70, let's call it right in the middle, 75% people live within 100 miles of where they grew up.
Wow.
And that stat on its own just seems kind of like you kind of take a step back. But and for a guy like me, I was born in Orlando and grew up in Alabama, and now I live in Illinois, and I've lived in Las Vegas, Indiana, Mississippi, like I've been all over the place. It's hard to fathom that, but I love that. And it's fine if you live within 100 miles of where you grew up. I just
Right.
always love when people have gotten to see experience outside of 100 miles of where they grew up. It's fine if you come back
Right.
home, but did you go see the New Yorks and the Californias and the Texas and learn about different people, different cultures, different areas of this great country?
And then, for some, like Alexandra, who ran professionally for 10 years, she got to see, different parts of the
The
world.
world.
And, I've got to add to that as far as professional, Asia Evans.
Yeah. Oh, Asia Evans was Morgan Park.
Asia Evans was Morgan Park. She
Let- let-
came out the year after Alex in 2006.
Let's make sure I'm thinking the right person. Evans went to Illinois.
She ended up at Illinois.
Is she the one? If she's not, this person I'm describing is amazing to me. This is what I remember. She was all Big Ten in the 60 and the shot put. Is that Asia Evans?
That's the Asia Evans.
That is amazing. You did not hear that incorrect. Asia
she,
Evans, which I did not know went to Morgan Park. Love that.
yes,
She was here in Illinois. She is all Big Ten. Now we're talking about the Big Ten,
all Big Ten.
and is all Big Ten in the 60, maybe the 100. I don't remember, but was so obviously you're finalist in the 60. You're a stud sprinter right there for the Big Ten.
Right.
But then also scores in the shot put, not the long jump, not the triple jump, which would all be amazing.
Yes.
The shot put. So I have to assume she did the throws for you as well. Like she didn't just pick that up in college, I assume.
No, she didn't pick that up in college. We saw her explosive strength potential again through testing and, suggested, why don't you try the shot? And she was reluctant at first.
Of course.
And, for one, when you look at most throwers, shot putters, she would be considered undersized for a thrower. But for her career, and I don't have verified information on this, but I don't think anyone has done this for Illinois high school track and field. She placed in the shot put at the state meet. She placed in the 100 at the state meet, and she anchored the 4x2 to first place at the state meet.
Coach, that's ridiculous. If you would have told me that story, if I didn't know Asia Evans, I'd be like, yeah, coach is pulling my leg. It doesn't happen. I mean, that is, I guess it just shows you the athleticism of track athletes. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, and if you do just a little testing,
Yes.
and then while she was at Illinois, I think she started out at UNLV, went to Illinois, and the throws coach at Illinois just saw her explosive potential and asked her, have you ever thought about doing the bobsled combine?
Right.
She's like, bobsled, I live in Chicago. So he convinced her, she did the combine and got a perfect score.
Wow.
So ended up being on the U.S. bobsled team and got a bronze at Sochi. I think that was 2013.
And I think she was is she the first? Because Lolo's famous for doing both, and all respect.
Right.
But wasn't Asia if I remember, was she the first one to get a medal at 2 world champs? Or I can't remember I thought she was the first one to do something for the Winter Olympics and the Summer Olympics or something.
The Winter and Summer Olympics was, that wasn't Asia. That was Lauren Williams.
That's right. University of Miami. Great. Yep.
Right.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, that's fantastic, though. I mean, again, you talk about broadening experiences, but I really love going back to the root of it. Your testing is what helped show this.
Right.
Asia might have, in a quote unquote typical program, I shouldn't say typical program, a program that's not doing this kind of testing, she would have gone on and still, because of her athleticism and coaching, been a great sprinter. But because of testing, she was able to help her team out in the shot put as well, both high school and collegiately, which is just
Right.
great. That is unbelievable. That's so awesome. So awesome.
And there's so many stories. It would take a whole day. The ones who, went downstate, the ones who didn't go downstate, but they're still successful because they got so much out of being on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Just hundreds of stories.
Well, we talked about no one does it on their own, right? We're built on the shoulders of men and women that came before us and did things before us and support us. And it's amazing in your age and stage now as a coach, you are a lot of people would tell me that you are their mentor. You are their inspiration and help for coaching and how they coach. I'd like to learn through this 30-year period at Morgan Park, before we jump into, go get in our Wayback Machine and go back in time. Who were some of the mentors that have helped you through this momentum time at Morgan Park? You mentioned one of my dear people that I love as well at Adams. Who were some of the others that kind of along the way helped you out, or kind of your support system?
Well, initially, Coach Ed Wallace, Chicago Public League coach, and he later wrote a book called The Coach's Survival Guide.
We could use that.
Yes.
We need an actual kit.
But he taught me the value of coaching education before there was formal coaching education.
Interesting.
Because, I would talk to him and, he would ask me, I'm talking about hurdles, and he would, well, you're the Wilbur Ross.
Oh yeah.
Wilbur Ross. And yeah, he wrote the Hurdler's Bible. You don't know that?
Oh yeah. No, the literal Bible. Absolutely.
Yes.
Wilbur
So
Ross.
I go and I get the Hurdler's Bible. So next time I see Coach Wallace, I'm going to be ready because I've got the Hurdler's Bible. So I saw him again, and I'm going to talk about hurdling. And he said, Wilbur Ross, like you never heard of him. He said, you know anything about distance running? He kept challenging me to learn more and more.
Yeah, nice.
And then I've got to Coach Gary Winkler when he was at U of I.
Absolutely.
Probably the first real mentor that I would communicate with, back and forth. He recruited about 7 or 8 of, our young ladies. When I was doing my USA TF Level 3 project, he was my advisor.
Awesome.
Coach Curtis Fry down at South Carolina.
Great guy.
Yes, almost like family. And I've got to name, because over the decades we've become closer and closer. Coach Nino Fenoy, East St. Louis.
Oh yeah, what he does what a job!
Wow.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I call him the iconic Coach Nino Fenoy, but we talk on a regular basis. And a lot of the things that, we talk about are, things that we've been talking about right now. Social issues that our young people are up against, trying to get them out of their environment, not afraid to take a chance and travel. So he's been an ongoing mentor. And then there's, there's just a whole list of people I would call that have influenced my thinking. Coaches that I've read things on, and um, gone to their clinics, like, Tom Tellez,
Mm.
uh, Clyde Hart, John Smith, Boo Snacks Nader, um, Brooks Johnson,
Mm.
Joe V. Hill, Dan Paff, uh, Tony Vini. Uh,
Coach, it sounds like you have just opened up the track Hall of Fame. Just reading that, it's quite astonishing. The people that have poured into you and that you have made yourself available to be poured into. It's one thing
yes,
to seek out coaching education, but sometimes people don't want to hear from others. You seem to be very open. Like, let me hear from you, and then you can discern.
right, right. Tony Wells, you remember Tony Wells out of
Oh,
Colorado?
love Tony.
Vern Gambetta,
Awesome.
learned a lot, just listening to him and reading his material. So I think you know mentors that are directly related to you, and then those others that are influential. Bobby Kersey,
Mm.
you know, he's got to be there. Uh, just whenever I can find something or listen to him talk. He said something once at a Curtis Fry clinic that I like to pick up these little quotes, little sayings, so you never know when you might need them. And he said, "Those who know why will often beat those who only know how."
That Bobby said that.
Yes.
That kind of, from what I don't know Bobby very well, but from what I do know, that sounds like a Bobby Kersey quote. Yeah.
So it got me to think, okay, you've got to explain or teach the why, not just, okay, do this, but here's why we do it. And then of course I've got to add the biggest mentor and the biggest influencer and uh, everything I owe to what I become and maybe become, I owe to my mother, Marion B. Calhoun.
Oh, yeah. Was she, talk to me about her a little bit. You mentioned, you just mentioned like the Mount Rushmore of track and field coaches. And then you said the person that trumps all of them
Yes.
is mom. So talk to us about mom a little bit. Did she influence you specifically in track and field or more of life?
More in life. Myself, I have an older sister, stressed education. We lived on a single parent home. And many times she worked two jobs so that we could have what we needed. Lived on the south side, lived in, Inglewood for a while, but she always managed to keep us in the right schools, try to keep us in the right direction. We moved a little further south, but, still in Chicago. And I think one of the, you know, indirectly showing that you can overcome your situation. But again, stressing, hard work, being on time, being prepared. And it's some of the same things you pass on to your athletes. I don't have my spikes today. Okay, you got to be prepared every day. You got to be on time. So it's those same basic tenets that she passed on that I'm now passing on.
Shout out to single moms. You mentioned mom single mom. I'm a single mom product myself. Um, Parenthood, and now I thank goodness I'm not a single parent. I have my wife with me with two kids, and it's hard enough when I have someone who is my partner in crime, raising these two little kids. Single moms love you to death. The sacrifice you make will never be thanked enough and gratitude enough. So thank you so much for that. And thanks to Mrs. Calhoun. She obviously raised someone pretty good who, so your influence over athletes and students is a direct correlation from her. If she doesn't pour into
Yes,
you, you don't get to pour into hundreds if thousands of kids on your own. So it's a direct reflection on her leadership with you, and then how you translated that leadership into specifically track coaching. That's awesome, man. Shout out to mom. Love that. Love that.
yes.
Before we continue that thread and start learning more about your background growing up and into track and field, on top of that, learning about your mentors. You mentioned Coach Dawson. Who were some of the other assistant coaches you've had over the time that have helped raise this great program?
Well, here's the shocker. We've been the main two.
Really?
Yes.
I am shocked. I would have thought coach comes in for a year before they transfer out somewhere else or whatever. Really? You and Coach Dawson just leading the ship?
That's it. The yin and the yang. We're it.
Wow.
We've had a couple of our former athletes come back that, wanted to try and get into coaching and, learn some things from us for a little while and, then moved on. Actually, I mentioned her earlier, Crystal Riley, that's now at Kenwood. She came back and was with us for a year or two, and we were able to get her into her own program when Westinghouse reopened, Westinghouse High School. But leading the charge has been the two of us.
And Coach Dawson's still there today?
Still there.
Man, Coach Dawson, because I know you're listening. You're awesome. Put up with this guy for that long. First of all, you're a saint. That's why you got into the Hall of Fame alone.
Right. I think that was the reason.
Well, that is, again, that consistency that you don't see that as often as we should, but that consistency of a program with two leaders at the helm, you could, that helps with the success, right? I mean, you just continue to build on and build on and build on.
Yes, the two of us in an L-shaped hallway. That's been us.
I can't stress it enough. If you're a college coach, if you can get up to Chicago when you go to recruit, and you should be recruiting Chicago, but make sure you find out, like, show me where you practice, coach. You got to see this. You have to literally see it for yourself to really appreciate what the majority of high schools in Chicago, and I'm sure it's maybe similar in like New York City and stuff too, but in Chicago, it's special, man. It's hallway city.
Hallway city. Yep.
So let's hop back here, Coach Calhoun.
Okay.
Again, you have, it's amazing what Morgan Park has become. It's amazing what Morgan Park has consistently been. And we didn't, we should probably explain Morgan Park High School. Give us like a 30-second, how big is it, the academic side of it? Morgan Park itself, the high school is a really tradition-rich high school outside of track and field.
Yes, it is. Focuses in on a lot of academics. Like I said, they do have a 7th and 8th grade program there. For the longest, the enrollment was about 2,400. Unfortunately, now it's about half of that. But it was always a rich tradition of academic excellence, and we stress that in our program. Even when we give each student athlete our own handbook. And it has in there, achievements and records, but it also stresses the academic part of it. And, we look at the GPA, and then we look at the team GPA. And we have in there that our best year for like 35 girls, we had an overall team GPA of 3.69.
3.69.
Yes.
When I went to school, I didn't think the GPA went past 3. So it's pretty impressive. Well, it's a special school. I've had the privilege to come visit. I can't remember what college I was at the time. I think it was maybe Ball State. I think I was over in Indiana, and I came to Morgan Park and recruited some kid who was smart enough to not let me coach them. They went somewhere else, but it was a great school. And I think that's, it was funny. I'd met you when I was at De La Salle, and I'm so lucky that I was De La Salle was an all boys school. It coached the girls. We didn't have to butt head. I didn't want to butt heads with coach. So luckily I was out of the way for you on that one. Well, let's learn more about Derrick Calhoun. So coach, you mentioned you are a Chicago through and through. You're born and raised there. Talk to us. When did track become a thing for you? Was it earlier than high school? In high school, how did you get into this crazy sport?
High school, went to Senn High School on the north side, SENN. Actually, there were quite a few of us from the South Side, the elementary school I went to, that were allowed to go up there. They had what was called permissive transfer because a number of the South Side schools were overcrowded.
Hmm.
So I went up there. Ed Adams went up there.
That's
We were at the
awesome.
same elementary school.
Love that.
And, you're talking about what you're going to get on. And we said, okay, we're going to get on the track team. So it's September and, we're out there running around the school, big school. And we asked one of the varsity boys that was passing us up for about the third time, when do we get to start running the 100 or 200? And he said, this is cross country. We thought we were on the track team. Okay. And we had to, from the school, we had to run to a hill called Montrose Harbor Hill, which is on the lakefront. So the first time we ran up there and we finally made it, we're like, oh. Then the coach said, okay, now we're going to practice.
Did you stick with it, or did you were like, no, I'll see you in the spring? Did you stick
I
with cross
actually
country?
did. I stuck with it for 4 years.
Wow.
Ed Adams, he played football and came back for the
Ed was
track
like,
season.
I'll see you in the spring. I'm gonna go.
I'm gonna play football. But cross country gave me a good foundation, and I continued to do it because I felt that it conditioned me for the track season. So I brought that same philosophy to Morgan Park. The track team is a cross country team, and the cross country team is a track team. And along the way for Morgan Park, they won 9 city championships in cross country.
Wow.
So my start was high school. Well, for the track season, every year we had a different coach. The my junior year, we had the football coach. So we didn't have a track at the school, so we had to get on public transportation and go to a stadium. And he would, just sit in the stands, and you pretty much just did whatever you wanted to do while he smoked cigarettes. And so I decided to start making up workouts for the sprint team.
Now, hold on. You said this is junior year, so you're 16, 17
right.
years old.
Right.
Most kids, I'm going to assume, would just have gotten discouraged because coach isn't paying attention and whatever, and they'd have quit and maybe join another sport or whatever. You took maybe the complete opposite path. You stepped up and said, well, okay, well, if coach isn't going to do it, I'll figure it out. I'll make workouts.
Yes. So then on your class schedule, you had a study hall in there, and you could go to the study hall room or you go to the library. So I'd go to the library and I'd read books on track and field.
Wow.
Now I should have been reading my homework.
You were studying science. You're fine. You're good.
Yeah, I'm good. Okay. So that was my start, and I'd write the workouts on the little index cards and bring them to practice. And
so did you have a thought of becoming a track coach at that point, or are you just in the moment of like, well, I got to help my team and myself, so I'm just doing workouts as an athlete?
Just in the moment, but having looked back, that was starting me on the path.
Absolutely, yeah. We have hindsight now. It's like, duh.
Yeah,
we know exactly what you were doing. Yeah.
And then another interesting story. We actually got a good track coach our senior year.
Good.
But my senior year, in Chicago, they didn't have girls track in high schools back then. So if a girl wanted to run track, she had to run track for Mary Daly Youth Foundation.
Yeah.
And you've got Ira Murchison, they're coaching. You've got Olympians like Willie White, Mamie Rollins. So the young lady I was saying went to Harlan, and she ran for the Mary Daly Youth Foundation. And they practiced at the University of Chicago. And then you could just go in there and practice. And so I'd stop by, and then one day I got the notion, I don't know from where, And I told her, "Are you ready? I don't like the way they're training you." And she,
Of course you did. I should have seen that one coming.
and her being her with a great retort, said, "Well, if you don't like it, then why don't you train me?" And I said, "Okay, I will." And if you ask her about that today, she would go, "OMG, why did I say that?
What was I thinking?
What was I thinking?" But Pat Henderson became the first individual that I coached. And the most memorable race was, it was an outdoor meet at the University of Chicago. Her and Mamie Rollins, and there were some other women in the field running the 100-yard dash. It was yards then. They running 100 yards. And from the start of the gun, those two were neck and neck. Crossed the finish line, dead heat,
Wow.
10.5 for 100 yards.
Wow.
So I think that converts to meters to like 11.4 or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So
Wow.
I kind of like to think that, you know, like I said, she was in high school, and you're running 11.4 equivalent for 100 meters.
Yeah.
And then the next 11.4 person I coached also, and that was Alexander Anderson.
It's a little bit of a gap there, but
Little bit of a gap.
Understandable when you're talking about those kind of times, though. They don't come every year.
They don't come every year, but Pat would go on to run for Ed Temple down at Tennessee State.
I was wondering, that was the Mecca, and
yeah, she was a Tiger Bell.
Awesome.
But she made me feel good. She said, "But I never ran as fast."
Wow.
So that was my start.
What was the opportunities for you at that time as you got out of high school and now you're coaching? Was there college opportunity? It was a different time back then. Were there college opportunities or coaching opportunity? What was your game plan?
Well, game plan leaving high school was college. It wasn't about coaching. I wanted to go into electronics.
Oh.
I wanted, electronics was a big thing, and I like doing things with my hand, repairing things, fixing things. And so I first University of Wisconsin, Platteville, and majored in industrial technology.
Yeah.
But I would still go to the library and read books on track and field.
It was just it wouldn't let you go. It just kept drawing you in.
So I had a stay there for a while at Wisconsin, and then, years later, end up finishing at Chicago State University. And so fast forward to late 80s, kind of got back into track and field.
And where did serving as a police officer come into play here?
That came into play around, I got on the force in 1978.
Yeah. What was the impetus for that? Why become a police officer? You had a lot of skills. There's a lot of things you could have done.
Well, I decided I wanted something where I could move around, maybe be outside, not just at a desk or, that type of job. And my brother-in-law was a former Chicago police officer before he moved on. Actually, he was had a position at Governor State University.
Oh, yeah.
And he knew that I was interested in possibly going to law enforcement. And he called me and said, Will County Sheriff's Police is out here and they're handing out applications. And so I went out there and I filled out one.
Sometimes it's just that simple.
Sometimes it's just that simple. And that's how I got into law enforcement.
So as you're in the sheriff's and law enforcement, what was your first coaching? Like, again, track keeps bringing you in here. What was your first, high school? Did you ever coach college, or has it all been in high school?
Yeah, it's all been in high school.
So what was the first high school coaching?
First high school coaching was at Corliss High School.
Okay.
I was off on a Saturday, and I said, I haven't been to a track meet in a long time. And so then they would put the upcoming sports events back again in the newspaper. So I said, they're having a track meet. I think it was over at Inglewood. Let me go watch the meet over there. And it was a girls' meet. And as I was coming in, there was a coach going somewhere and spoke to her. And I think I asked her a question of what event they were on or something like that. And watched the meet. And then later on that day, I saw that exact same coach somewhere else. And so got to talking. She was at Corliss and it was just her. So I went over there to volunteer to help her at Corliss. So that's kind of where it started.
Were
Uh,
you, going into, call it official, coaching high school, were you nervous? Did you just fall back on, I mean, you've been studying it pretty much your whole life, even coming
right.
junior year in high school, for crying out loud. Did it come naturally for you and you just fell right into rhythm with it?
I think so, because when I, got there, I saw a lot of things that, I suggested that, could be done differently. And then actually, that's when I started the summer program. We started with 3 girls, and we formed the Fire Starters Track Club. I think that was 87 or something like that. And then the head coach that was there at Corliss, she took a position with the Chicago Police Department. So I had also been asked by another young lady to come to Providence Catholic in New Lenox
Mm.
to coach. Say, well, okay, that's not far. I'm in Joliet. New Lenox is
Mhm.
next town over. So did that, and for a short stay, and till I ran into, like I said, Kathy Williams and Nicole Randall at the Prairie State Games.
So with those years at before Morgan Park, coaching at those high schools, what what was the level of success of the athletes compared to what we just talked about at Morgan Park?
Well, the summer team, they made it to nationals. They qualified for nationals. I think the I think there was an individual and maybe a relay that qualified to go downstate at Corliss. I wasn't able to make it. I wasn't able to get off for that weekend. But when I was at Providence, I did have Bernetta Jones. She placed in the 100 and the 200 at the state meet.
So what was the difference when you got to Morgan Park? Now, I love that with Bernice, you had that experience of scoring at the state meet. So I can see where, as you got to Morgan Park, it was like, no, this is what we do. This is what I just did at my old place. We score points. But what was different with the Morgan Park program that, it exploded into this success of, years of state trophies?
I think it was that you had more of the Bernetta Jones individuals at Morgan Park. The talent level was there, and that it just needed to be developed,
Hmm.
and they needed a different mindset that they can compete outside of just the city championship.
I like that. Uh, Coach, as we start to wrap up today, again, one of the things we want to do is bring, as much value as possible. So, one of the things that you have that a lot of us listening don't have is that experience, right? It's one of the things that
Yes.
you can't force. I can force you to read a book, I can force you to go to a coaching edge class, I can coach you on the track, but years upon years stack up on themselves. You've had so many different kids in different situations. You talked about the individuality of the athlete themselves. So you've had to pivot and adjust for a lot of different athletes. You
Yes.
probably never guessed you were going to have a shot putting sprinter or a
Right.
sprinting shot putter. I don't know. Yeah. So, you had to learn those things. And so you have that knowledge and experience. For those of us who may be listening that are in our first year, 5 year, 10 years of our coaching career, what advice would you give young coaches as they look to a guy like you and they're like, man, that guy's brought home oodles and oodles of trophies. I want to bring home
Mm-hmm.
my fair share of trophies for my program as well. What advice would you give those young men and women that are starting their career or, in the beginning of their career?
I would advise to, align yourself with someone who can be a mentor or mentors, get all the coaching education you can, because you never know when you might need some piece of information that you learned somewhere. And I heard Vern Gambetta say this a number of times, things that you put in your coach's toolbox, and you never know when you might need a specific tool. And the bigger your toolbox, the more resources you have to align yourself with. So mentors, uh, coaching education, knowing that it takes time. Don't get caught up in something that Dan Paff, I got this from him, called recipe coaching. That you go to a clinic and a coach explains, here's what I do for my 400 runner. Maybe he's a collegiate coach or an Olympic coach. I do this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And you go try and do the same thing.
Yeah.
That's recipe coaching.
Yeah.
You got to extract what is the idea behind the workout, what are they trying to accomplish, and then you have to create something that your athlete can do, and not try to do what the elite athlete is doing, but what is the idea behind that. And one of the things I got from Coach Winkler when putting together a training plan for a period of time, what is the major emphasis is going to be and what is the minor emphasis going to be. And you have to be a little bit detailed, so it takes a little bit of work, and you have to be able to be flexible and change. You may have spent the whole weekend doing your workout plan for the week. Monday, we're going to do this, and then it storms and it's 20-mile-an-hour winds. Okay, what are you going to do? You can't do the workout, so you have to be able to revert back to something and change. Or you got that same workout plan and it's a great day outside and your athletes just aren't responding. Well, maybe they haven't recovered from the last workout. So instead of forcing them, maybe change it to something they can do. So you got to be flexible in that way and be able to change the workout to suit the environment and to suit the athlete.
That's a great reminder that your workouts are not chiseled in tablets. They are not the 10 commandments.
They're not.
You are allowed to use your eraser on your pencil or your back key if you're writing them on your iPads. That's a great example of the flexibility and adaptability of a coach. And I tell you, over this past year with COVID, I have seen the real adaptability of track people,
Yes.
man, and track athletes. I mean, just to be able to pivot and continue to keep your athletes mentally up to be ready for next year. If we were even going to have, I mean, there was we never we didn't know until we knew that we were going to have a 2021.
Right.
But I'm just so proud of all the coaches of just their adaptability and positivity to keep these kids focused, in line, keep them towards graduation, keep them towards staying out of trouble, getting on that track and competing in this sport. It's we've just seen so much of it. I also love your example there of Coach Paff of recipe coaching, because that is a recipe. It's a recipe for disaster.
Right.
I implore you, if you are speaking at a clinic, don't ever hand out your workouts. The themes, you're right. Like, why are we doing these
Right.
things? Which brings us back to Bobby Kersey's, those who know why,
Yes.
the why you're coaching, but to actually give the X's and O's of 5x100 or whatever. Oh man, I'm afraid there will be plenty of people who will take that and go, "Hey, little Susie, guess what we're doing today in workout? It says Monday, so we're doing
Yeah,
this."
it says it right here.
A kid ran 11:20 who did this, so you should be able to run 11:20. So, yeah. Like, kid's gonna run 11 minutes 20 seconds if you're not careful. So,
Exactly.
Coach, man, thank you so much. One of the most endearing and expensive things that you can ever give someone else, and me in this instance, and us here at Gale Athletics, is your time and energy. And so I know, we are in the middle. Thankfully, we are in the middle of track season here, specifically in Illinois. And you've got a track meet today.
Yes.
So for you to spend time with us today and just share with us the special program that you've helped create with other people, Coach Dawson and many athletes and mentors and administrators, bus driver. I mean, there's just so many people that
Yes, it is.
pour into this program. I'm just so thankful and humbled that you would spend the time with us to help us understand how you got there and what you did, and even some great advice to our young coaches out there.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I know we talked about it last month of doing this, and I was looking forward to it. Getting part of the story out so that you could hear it. Some other people can hear it and maybe take some good positive points from it, and that in the end we're working to enhance young people. To let them see they can go beyond what they thought.
I love that you had a not so great track coach your junior year, because that might have been the first start of the fire, if you will, to becoming a
Yes.
track coach. I love that when I came up to Gately Park with Craig Collins, a month or so ago, and the day before I was going to visit and do a tour and all that with Craig, he emails me and says, "Hey, are you okay if Morgan Park's coach Derrick Calhoun joins us?" And I wanted to be like, "Craig, yes, like you don't have to ask that. Like, who Derrick Calhoun is, right? Like, he can go wherever he wants. He doesn't need invitation." So was just so thankful that you were there today, that we got to reconnect from a long
Yes.
time ago for me, man. For 2 or 3 former careers for me back in the day. But I'm just so happy that we did get to connect and that you agreed to join us, because your story, your journey is important. It is what you are built on, your mom and the coaches that were mentors for you. And there are coaches like Crystal and more that are built on what you have done, and those will continue. And so I'm just so happy to be a part of that journey, to be able to share that with others, man. I'm just so thankful. Thank you so much, Coach.
I want to thank you, and again thank Gil for letting me do this. It's been a pleasure.
It's our honor, man. And thank you so much for being here and listening today. I just want to implore you, every week I tell you, if you received value, please share it with others, and you should be doing that. And I would appreciate that. And we'd all appreciate that. But that last little, call it 10, 15 minutes there, where I asked Coach, what advice would you give to a younger coach that's starting out? If you don't want to share the whole episode, that's okay. If you would take that 10-minute block from there in Coach Calhoun's words and share that with an assistant coach that's on your staff, or if you're an administrator listening and you have a new head coach in their first 1 to 5 years, share it with them. Let's kind of speed up the experience level, if you will. Let's help
Right.
coaches get better faster, because that just helps us affect our athletes better faster. So if you would do me a favor, share that, and that will just increase the value that we're providing here. So thank you again for being here this week, Coach Calhoun. Man, I love you to death. Thank you so much for everything. And join us next week, and we're going to do it all over again. We're going to have another one, not as good as Coach Calhoun, though. So thank you so much. Have a great week.
Thank you.